It's that time in the month again when it's time to look at the month ahead. In fact, it's that time in the year when we get to have a little bit of a look at what's left in this year. Of course, we've just had the spring equinox, and the equinoxes and solstices not only introduce the next month, but also introduce more or less the next season. Of course, spring only started at the equinox, and that means summer actually only officially starts at the solstice, which is 22nd of December, more or less. And so the division of our lives into seasons is, of course, a natural division created by the relationship between the sun and the earth. And astrology, in so many ways, is all about the relationship between the sun and the earth. It's not only about that, of course, but that is an important part of it. So we're looking at what does October hold for us, but also a little bit about what is this whole spring period really about. Well, here in South Africa, of course, we've significantly changed our lockdown situation, now down to level 1 as I speak, and so we expect to see the country opening up. And indeed, so much of what this month's chart is all about and the season's chart is all about is international connections. In fact, it's likely that there will be some shifts in our international connections, partly related to our response to the virus as well. It does seem as if we're creating new friends, possibly the odd new enemy, but it's much more that there are new connections and new international connections, and depending on how the government allow their list of countries to work and so on, it does look like much of the world is lining up to come to South Africa, which is great for the tourism industry, but it's important to remember that's how the virus spreads around as well. So of course we need to be cautiously optimistic, and the government needs to be extremely cautious as much as we would like it to open up. But the good news is that the tourist industry and the economy that derives from that is fertile and ready to happen, and is going to happen. At whatever level they allow foreigners to come visit us, that is going to dramatically affect us. They are going to come running. That does mean for all of us, we need to keep our protections in place. Our masks and our social distancing needs to be a habit, at least for the season of spring. Probably will be good for hay fever at the same time. It's not all good news though for this government. It does look as if, as we know, the president is fighting battles on many fronts. One of the issues that we've frequently faced in talking about him and talking about what he does is that he tends to be more words than action, and he tends really not to follow up on all his great claims to pursue all the high-level crime in this country. And it is slightly concerning that the same does seem to be happening in his efforts to root out corruption in the ANC. We've seen, in the news cycle, a lot of that has faded quietly into the background, and looking at the charts, it does look like there isn't very much going on there. It's not only because of all talk and no action though, it's really because I frequently have mentioned the internal battle he is facing is much larger than it looks like. And this month in his chart it shows that he is on a knife edge. Now it's true for much of the season of spring, so it's not October alone that I'm referring to, and indeed this is going to come up again early in the new year, as I've said before. So depending on how it goes now, of course, is what happens then, but it does look like over this next month his presidency is at severe risk, in the sense that there is an insurrection being planned within his own party. There are those that are determined to get him out, and during the next month are probably going to try and act on that. That action is not likely to be out in the open, but we might eventually hear about it, or with our brilliant reporters we have in this country, we may very well hear it from them. But it's a time of great danger for the president in that regard. The forces within the party are stronger than ever, and I suspect that's the main reason we've seen very little response to his anti-corruption drive after the initial flurry that, of course, was going to happen, and it's got to look like something's happening. But why the process is grinding to a halt, just like all these other anti-corruption processes do in this country, is really because of that difficult battle he faces within the party. So, what it also shows is that the reason why that affects him so much now is that he's currently in a situation where he's depending on many others for whatever he needs to do. That goes without saying that he can't do it himself, but it does tell us that perhaps some of those excuses he has are true. It's one thing to expose corruption, but the presidency and the government itself can't actually do anything about it. They must rely on the NPA. But of course, the good news is that other resources that are positive resources that certainly help him and help us fulfill the efforts to help rebuild this country after the crisis we've been through, that does look very promising in the chart. And it does look as if he'll be able to pull in resources from all sorts of places, including to a limited extent our neighbors. So it's a tightrope, but these new international connections are actually going to allow us to make a lot of progress. And in fact, economically speaking, while it doesn't look like there's any dramatic improvement, it does look like there are the seeds of a recovery in place. And I suspect, especially once we get to the later part of spring, after November, perhaps really into December, we will suddenly see much more dramatic economic recovery. So we've gone into level 1, tourism is opening up, everyone is expecting things to develop fast. Do not despair. We'll only really see the developments of the economy once summer starts at the solstice in the 22nd of December, but we are getting there and we are laying the seeds for that right now. So there is hope that is worth hanging on to, because probably means that next year we're going to be in a much stronger economic situation. So things are probably not quite as bad as they might seem. And from the health point of view, it doesn't really look like there's a significant increased challenge now that the country has opened up so much more. Of course, there will be some increase, that's just natural, but it doesn't look as if there's an overpowering problem with regards to that. One last thing to look out for, which also might be something good for the month ahead, and that is a popular public figure, can even come from the government, you never know, but who will also help steer us forward in the time ahead. It could be the president, but probably isn't, and may very well be female. That could also come from somewhere else, like the entertainment industry or something like that, which also helps rebuild our hope and courage for the time ahead. And we are getting there. Once summer comes, we're growing again. So that means the month ahead and the season ahead is a time to plant those seeds and get ready, and don't panic, they're going to take a little while to sprout. Aries, looks like spring suits you very well this year. It's full of new things and especially new people around you. For many Aries, that's going to be new neighbors or even a new neighborhood. If you're moving home, goes without saying. But even if you aren't, it's like there's a different environment around you, and it's full of possibility and even opportunity. So Aries, your task for the month ahead is to look around you and to begin to discover what new things there are. It's a kind of a thinking out of the box experience, but you don't even have to do that much of the thinking. Just keep your eyes open and your mind open, and you'll realize there's new resources and new possibilities available to you through the environment you find yourself in, new places that you find yourself in this month, and new people that you find yourself meeting and encountering. Take your inspiration from the young and the energetic, because those are going to be the kind of people that you find around yourself, and this is going to be a great opportunity to get your goals into action. Like many of us at this time of year, things might take a tiny bit longer than you're expecting them to take, but do not lose hope. As the month goes by, the progress is happening, and by the end of the month, you're steaming along all the way. Taurus, while we're on the subject of getting going for spring and the new season, the chart makes it look like you've got your feet firmly rooted in the soil. So if you're into planting and doing all of those spring things, this is going to be a great season for you. But metaphorically, that's just as important. And it looks like you're following the national pattern of making new connections and getting help from people and places where either it doesn't usually come from or simply because they're new ones. In fact, despite your feet on the ground, this is a really good month for traveling for you, and where possible, traveling to places you haven't been to. A lot of the gains at this time in your life will come from sources that you haven't been able to rely on in the past, or you just haven't had the opportunity to. It could be making new friends. For those of you who are not in a relationship, it could be that kind of serious friendship that turns into something. And for all of the Taurians out there as well, it's just a great time for new people in your life. These are people probably who are also a little bit different than yourself and can provide new opportunities or new ways of seeing things. For your existing friendships or existing social situations, this is an important time to clear up, clean up, and fix up some of those bonds, especially where there has been conflict or something in the past. You can actually get things back on an even keel and look forward to a happy spring. Geminis, of course, there's nothing better for you than to get your freedom back, and some Geminis will be taking the opportunity to travel this month, so of course be careful when you do, but there's lots of local travel, there's lots of places you can visit which are safe and fun, and there's a lot of need for recreation and fun in your chart, Gemini. It looks like you have been working really hard over the last couple of months, perhaps to catch up with what might have been slowed down by the crisis this year, or just because things haven't stopped for you and it's all happening. So while there might still be that quantity of work going on, it does look like there's much more opportunity to do fun things and things that you love. If you do find your work quotient going down, don't panic, it's just good timing. You're tuned in. I was talking earlier on about how we are actually tuned to the seasons, whether we like it or not. And in fact, the spring bug seems to have gotten new Geminis. So it's great to spend time with people, and like most of us during this month, with new people as well. Some Geminis will get the opportunity to study something new this month, which adds to their creative portfolio. It might just be something you're studying for the fun of it. Go for it. It might be something that you can use later on, but time to get lots of new input along with all the fun and pleasure. Cancerians, it looks like the hard graft is continuing or starting up, but it does look like you're doing a bit of slogging away. And the good news is that it isn't absolutely necessary to have to struggle or suffer because of that. The challenge for you this month, Cancerians, is to kind of break out of your need to look after others, your sense of responsibility, all the stuff that you're doing that isn't really for yourself. Firstly then, concentrate on doing the stuff that is your own and that is important for you right now, but also kind of expanding your horizons and perhaps getting a little bit more selfish in the process. It's cool. This is the time when you're going to find things that work better for you and suit you better to help you fulfill your goals over the many months ahead. So shake yourself up a little bit, clear out some of the old ways, and get rid of some baggage that you've been carrying for a while, because this is not the time to be dredging around in the past. True, there's some things you can't avoid at this time, and of course, not every responsibility can be thrown away. So it's also important that where you are working or doing stuff in a situation where others depend on you, this is the month that you've got to be really careful not to be taken advantage of. If you find yourself feeling sorry for yourself by the time that month end comes around, you've actually only got yourself to blame. So break out, be selfish, have more fun, get into the swing of spring. Leos, it might seem to you as if some of the progress or efforts that you've made over the last little while seem to be, on pause or even dead in the water, worst case scenario, but none of the above is true. You just have to adapt to the timing. It could be a situation of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Again, that doesn't mean that the work that you're doing is unnecessary or meaningless. It's still going to add up in the end, and you're just going to have to go with the pace of things. One of the things to examine is that you might be depending too closely on someone, perhaps even someone that you shouldn't be trusting with so much of your resources or access or whatever it is that you've given them. Be a little bit more cautious, have a few more boundaries in place in order for this time to be as much to your advantage as it is to anyone else around you. Like most people right now, you're making lots of new connections. That's great, and indeed, some of them are going to be useful connections to have to help you get to your goals. But that doesn't mean you can just open your hands and mind and let them all in. But it does mean just have good boundaries in place and be aware that others stand to gain out of your gains, sometimes even more than you do right now. It's time to get a little bit more selfish, both in terms of your goals and also to make sure that you make your real friends and your personal connections an important anchor in your life right now. Virgos also get lots of good stuff from friends and connections at this time. But you know, you might have gone around being too nice for a little while, and this is building up. So one of the things for you, Virgo, this month is to tell it like it is. But do be prepared that that is going to get you into some trouble. So you're going to have to be good with your words and be careful about the button pushing. But you might find conflict. You might even find the end of some connections. Those don't look like terribly personal relationships, so sometimes it's got to end. What can you do? But also make sure that you don't say things out of frustration or out of simply losing your cool. It's one thing to get your point across and finally let it out, but it does look like there's a lot of collateral damage that you need to watch out for. This could also even be true in family members and especially with siblings. You know, those can be really strong connections. So if you do have siblings, this is a great time to, if necessary, re-establish connection or fix up that connection. Or if you have a great connection with a sibling, then really to capitalize on that and actually do something together, even if it's just something that makes for a better bonding experience with someone who is important. You need to have basically fewer frustrating people in your life right now, and you need to have more people that you can be open and clear and honest and a little bit more able to follow your own interests and not just be, how can I help you all the time. Libra, happy birthday. This is your month and it's going to be a good one. Of course, people and connections with people are what you're all about, and there is plenty of that for you this year. In fact, this could be the cliche Libra month for Librans, which means your existing relationships get the chance to really thrive, and for some people there are new relationships on the horizon. In fact, there might be even more than one, which is something that you'll have to manage, but it's really not all the same kinds of relationships. You're all about your connections with people, and you're going to have plenty of opportunity to connect with people on all different levels. The balance that you're going to have to find is that this also looks like a month where you get to pursue some of your heart's desire. Heart is not only about love affairs, it's also about what we really love or care about, whether that's grand and big and important as in lifelong heart's desire, or it's just where you are right now. After all, we've just been through a really tough winter, and it's time to actually pursue things that you love and that give you some of that pleasure. That's what it's all about. Travel can be some of it, and studying something new, like in order to expand your horizons. So just do something that you always wanted to do. Now's your chance. Scorpio, you could have been feeling extremely stuck and even a little bit put upon for quite some time now, and now is the time to break out and go for it, whatever it may be. Whether that's professional goals or something that you've been wanting to do on your home or something like that, this is the time to really go for it and not to try and win any popularity contests, because that's not going to happen. It does mean that in order to get to where we're talking about, you might have to step on a few toes, you might have to act a little bit selfishly at times. Well, that's what's going to be required in order to clear the path and get rid of some of the baggage that you've been carrying for a little while. There are signs of some interpersonal conflict, especially with Virgos. Watch out for that. If they are close friends, you don't want to mess it up for too long. But it might also be necessary for you to actually say what you've been feeling or what's been worrying you about a situation, rather than keeping it all to yourself and stewing, which is not the best way to do things right now. In fact, if you go it alone or if you focus on your own goals, there can be great benefits for you. It'll improve your mood and improve everything else, and that will also make sure that you don't get into too much conflict. It is important right now to take care of your health. That frustration and those kind of things could have been affecting you quite strongly. Stress and frustration make us vulnerable to illness. So just make sure you put yourself into a more positive space by just finally going for it. Sagittarius, things are still moving a little bit more slowly than you like, but at least they are moving. The challenge is a typical Sagittarian challenge. You're rearing to go, you're on your horse and straining at the reins, and it looks as if things are still going to have to catch up with you a little bit. In fact, it's because there's some unfinished business that needs to be wrapped up, and you allowing something that's you're not really confronting, you're not really facing, to hold you back in some way. If it's someone that you need to clear things up with, or if it's some unfinished job that you just haven't managed to write off yet, so clear up your space so that you can move ahead as fast as you're rearing to go. Nevertheless, the rearing to go means stuff is happening, and you'll find it much easier to pursue some goals that were put off months ago, perhaps when you were stymied because of the lockdown or whatever else got in your way. It does look like there is some help from people around you, but it's one of those times when it's about you've got to do your thing and stop having to deal with all the things and compromises and people that you've had to. As much as you'd like to go full steam ahead, think of this as an interim phase. You get to do your things, get your stuff on the plate, that's finally moving, you've wrapped up some old stuff, and then over the following months, everything starts moving forward again. Capricorns, your challenge over the next month is to keep up the momentum that you actually managed to create during the difficult winter that we've all just ended. You've managed to be very constructive and all of those things over this time, and now you might be finding yourself in a bit of a doldrums. Still lots of stuff on your plate and not quite sure where to go with it and what to do. Always a good idea is to do all the chores, the stuff that you don't like doing and clearing up, all of those kind of things. It's definitely always beneficial to do that. But of course, you're not in the month of making much forward progress. If you can take some time off, this would be a great time to do that, especially if you haven't managed to do that in the last months. But whether or not it's about time off, it's about understanding that it's not a time of forward progress, it's a time of gathering resources, completing some things, identifying what needs to be done in the time ahead, but not really being able to do much of it. Behind the scenes work, background things, private stuff that you do on your own, this is a great time for those kind of things. There might also be some unfinished business with enemies, people that you haven't confronted. Get that sorted out and you'll be moving ahead. Aquarians, sometimes we are our own worst enemy, and this could be one of those times for you. You're actually in a good space and you're in a strong place, so you're ready to make some progress on your goals and most importantly on yourself. But in order to do that, you have to identify some of the self-sabotage that's been going on at the moment. In fact, your whole theme for the month ahead is working on yourself and getting yourself to the place where you need to be, so that as goals and relationships and those other things unfold after that, you're in the best position to benefit from what becomes available to you. However, being your own worst enemy is things like not doing it when you should be, not picking up the ball and running for it, and sometimes even acting against yourself, pulling yourself down, not acting with confidence, allowing bad habits to overtake you, doing things which you know harm you. Ironically, more than ever, this is one of those months where you really can get on top of those things. So if you find yourself succumbing to bad habits, instead of thinking, oh no, sinking into despair, here I go again, what's the point? Rather think, excellent, it's come to the surface, I can identify it, it's right there for me to shoot it down, let me work on that. Use this time to identify and eliminate the ways that you hold yourself back. Pisces, it looks like things are moving smoothly along, which sounds great, but it's really one of those times where it's the foggy, happy place that Pisceans have that allows things to drift slowly along, when in fact things are beginning to drift away or slip through your fingers. And by things, I mean money and those kind of really tangible resources. Also because you're not asserting yourself or asserting your skills or talents strongly enough. That's what you need to be doing. Whether you're working for someone else or you need to get your show back on the road now that we're coming to the end of these lockdowns, it's really time to assert and emphasize what are your special skills and what are your special talents. It's also a great idea to have a look at your financial life in general right now and see where you've been allowing money to float away and slip away. From basic things like collect on some of the people who've been owing you that haven't paid you for a while, down to things like you didn't realize that that expense was being deducted and that one was too. Hey Pisces, you could really get your financial house not only in order but strong at this time if you realize that it's really just because of a vagueness or not keeping a strong hand on things that has made you feel insecure. You can sort this out quite easily. Take charge, deal with the small stuff, and suddenly your wealth begins to grow. Well, there it is. Looks like spring is planting seeds for us all. I will be here, of course, next week at the usual time. See you.